In 1936, Hitler brought in the army, and the Hitler Youth stood Spalier. Spalier is basically a French word. It was used with trees that they grow in rows, and you had to stand Spalier. That meant you stood as far as your arms would reach, and then there would be the next person. You held tight, you made a living chain for the army to come in. And I wanted to stand Spalier, but my stepfather had a different idea. And I guess in a way he had a better idea. He says, we'll go, he says, we'll go. But he says if we don't have to stand for all of it, then we can go to Heidelberg. He would take me to Heidelberg on trips. He had a bicycle, and he fixed his little carrier in the back where he could load me up on the bike, and we'd get loaded up and go to Heidelberg. Heidelberg was fascinating. Anytime I could get a trip to Heidelberg, I'd do anything. So, Heidelberg won. I skipped out on my having to stay in Spalier. I wanted to go to Heidelberg. But we did go to see the troops come in, and I was fascinated by it, because all these guys in uniforms, and, they marched past. Sometimes they smiled, and you smiled back. It was wonderful. And the horses, those beautiful horses, I loved those horses. But at the end of the parade, there were these caissons, these covered wagons, and they seemed to be dusty on the top. And so I asked my stepfather what they were all about. The parade, and he said the covered wagons that had so much dust on them. And I asked my stepfather what that was all about. And he said, that's when they buried the dead. And I had no idea that the troops coming in had anything to do with living or dying. And so I asked him, I said, what dead? He says, well, if there are wars, there will be dead soldiers, and when they decay, they have to be covered with that in order to decay more quickly, because you can't have the bodies laying around. And that was a part of my life that I never had to think of before. That stopped me. So we left at that point. At that point I lost interest in the parade, and we went to Heidelberg. And Heidelberg was fun. Heidelberg had two mountains. One of them was known as the seat of the king, the Königstuhl, and the other one was known as the Free Mountain, the Freiberg. We always went up the Königstuhl. About halfway, 3/4 up the Königstuhl, there was a castle. And that had been burned down by Napoleon. That went back quite a ways. But the ruins were still there, and they were absolutely wonderful. And I got to go in there, I got to check all these things out. It was free and open. You could go through this thing, you could play there. And I had a band there usually, and there was some wonderful music. It was just a wonderful outing. So with the outing, I set aside the parade, and my life went on. I did not go. I was asked by the Third Reich if I wanted to go into the gymnasium, and I thought about it. And my girlfriends were important to me. If I went into the gymnasium, I wouldn't have my friends. because I would get more education, and they pointed out to me that could mean that in the future I might be a lawyer or doctor or whatever. It would mean more money. They explained all these things to me, but I would have to give up my friends. And I had a sense of loyalty about that. We were loyal as friends. We belonged to each other. We had a strong sense of being there for each other. And so I turned it down.